Hi, my name's Kevin Hicks. Welcome to the History Squad. Now, today's video is taking you back into my past, way back into the 80s when I was a police officer right on the edge of West London in England, Denham in Buckinghamshire. It was different in those days being a police officer. I had my policeman's helmet. I even had an old-fashioned cape, like from the Victorian times. This was my only means of defence, that and a sharp tongue and a handy fist sometimes. We didn't have body cams, smartphones. I had a radio, but unfortunately Denham was in a dip and it very often didn't work. But what we did have in those days was a sense of duty. In those days, police officers, especially in Britain, we were there to serve the community, and I was known as a community bobby or a community police officer. And I believe that we made a difference serving the community there. But don't be fooled. In those long night shifts and those daytime patrols, there was still time for a bit of fun. The odd prank, a little bit of mischief. Not always me playing it on the public. The public, in fact, sometimes played a joke on me. Our police station, Gerrards Cross Police Station, Tatlin End was what it was known as. Old-fashioned police station, right up in the top of the attic, which was enormous, was our restroom, and a full-size snooker table. It was brilliant. When I first arrived there, excellent. You can have a couple of dozen officers coming through there, either on duty or on their break. Good game of snooker, a good chat, cup of coffee, cup of tea. The place was thriving. And downstairs, the serious business of policing. But sadly, over my period of time there, which wasn't that long, 7 or 8 years, we went from 20-odd officers passing through to me. I would very often be the only police officer in the station. But in its heyday, boy, did some things go on. Now, we had an office just upstairs, away from it all, the little community beat officers there, where we could do our paperwork because there was mounds of this stuff building. But next to our little office was a small changing room, and a couple of other police officers used it. They would come on duty, get changed out of civilian clothes into their police uniforms, and away they'd go. And one of those particular officers, a friend of mine, Chris, he would often leave a pair of trousers over one of our chairs in the office because Chris was often late. And I got fed up of having to pick up his clothes and go and put them in the changing room. And I says to one of the other police officers who shared the office, I said, I'm fed up of this. He says, oh, so am I. So I sewed up the end of one of his trousers. Now, I was pretty good at sewing, still am, learned how to do it in the army. Laid his trousers just over the top of the chair in the office and then went away on our beat. Now, the next morning, we're in there doing our paperwork. Chris is a little bit late, and you can hear him thundering up the stairs as he comes flying into the office. A quick good morning, straight into the changing room. Off go his civilian clothes. On comes his police shirt, his tie. He goes and grabs his trousers, puts one leg in. Perfect, it was the leg I hadn't sewn up. Then he puts the other leg in and hops out of the office, down the stairs, and crashes on the short landing just a little bit further down. Nobody was injured during this prank. We laughed. It taught Chris a lesson: don't leave your clothes hanging round. The inspector heard the crash, come to see what was going on, and roared with laughter. A certain police officer had been taught a little lesson. But later in the day, the press, Tatlin End Police Station, has anything interesting happened in the beats around Gerrards Cross, Denham and the Chalfonts? No, nothing really. Oh, there was one incident in the police station. Oh yes, what was that? It made the press. People throughout my beat, my ground, laughed. You've got to have fun. Sometimes being a police officer can be so hard. You need to let off the steam. Now, I had a particular chap down in Denham. People probably still remember him, Shep, the Shepherd. I knew him when he lived in a great big caravan thing, a trailer, and I used to pop in for a cup of coffee, and I was terrified that I might catch some disease. His cups were black. There was bacon hanging from the ceiling from something he'd slaughtered. Shep was from the Victorian times, but had drifted into the 20th century. I always remember his long, matted beard, the cigarette, the bacon sandwich. He was quite a character. And then, lo and behold, the local council gave him a ground floor flat, an apartment, right in the middle of my beat. Shep had arrived, complete with his baby goats. Nobody'd explained to Shep that he couldn't bring his goats into the village and he couldn't keep them in the spare bedroom of his apartment. And I had to go and serve a warrant. I knock on the door opens, I'm invited in, and I noticed the doors have all been eaten halfway up, the baby goats. So off I went. The council issued warnings against him, stop it, and I had to go back. But this time I had to arrest him and bring him out of the apartment. But I didn't want to go in. So I got a traffic cone. You know those great big long traffic cones? All his windows were open. And I used it as a loud hailer. Shep, come out with your hands up. You are surrounded. And I repeated it a few times and it echoed right into the windows. And all we saw was a pair of hands come up, followed by the shaggy beard of Shep. He continued to keep his goats. He continued to keep his sheep. But you know what? In the end, he became a breeder of a special kind of sheep, a rare breed, which in the end got taken, I believe, to somewhere where the Queen herself viewed them. I've never forgotten that character. I've never forgotten the taste of his tea. I never once had one of his bacon sandwiches. Now, for part of my time working out of Tatley End Police Station, I had a brilliant sergeant, Steve. And Steve would come along with me, or I'd give him a radio up and say, you know, could you come down and give us a hand? And he was brilliant. He'd come straight away. And this one time, I had a phone call. The radio comes up, you got a phone call, can you phone this number? And it was from an informant. Now, when you run an informant, there are strict guidelines. And this informant, a young lady, specifically requested at 9:30 in the evening that I go to her apartment. It was important, a bit of an emergency, but something didn't fit. Was it a come on? Was I going to go through the door and be beaten half to death? Was there somebody waiting in there? So I thought, I'll give Steve a call, see if he'll come down. And he says, yeah, great, no problems at all. So in we go to this apartment up into the middle floor, and I thought, this just isn't right. So I thought, I'm going to push Steve in first, and I'll be right on his shoulder. As we get up to the door is open. Hello? Female voice. The informant calls out, oh, come in, Kevin. And there were alarm bells ringing here. So I pushed Steve through the living room door, and I was ready to back him up. But it wasn't to come on for somebody to hit me, to kill me, to whatever. In fact, draped over the settee was the informant, the young lady, totally naked. And Steve actually gave out a yelp as he saw what it was. She gave out a yelp. Embarrassment all round, a big smile from me. Right on the edge of my ground at Denham was the Licensed Victuallers Association Retirement Homes and Nursing Home. The licensed victuallers, pub landlords, particularly British. So you owned a pub, you lived your life in that trade, you could be successful, you could be mediocre. But at the end of your days, one of the places you could go to retire was the licensed victuallers' homes. There were dozens upon dozens of these bungalows, these cottages, but there was also a 3-story nursing home with a full nursing staff, matron and all of the nurses that go with it. This was quite a place, and it was an important part of my beat. Now, once a year, in the summertime there, you had the Licensed Victuallers Association garden party. They came from all over Britain and indeed Ireland. One part of it was for the upper class of the licensed victuallers people, where they would have lobster dinner and champagne and all of this. Everything's going on in the centre of the licensed victuallers, this enormous estate. Some of the cottages on the outside are vulnerable. There are still villains around. So we would go around the outside, make sure everybody's house was secure. And I come round the corner, and what greeted me was a late middle-aged couple, shall we say, in their finery, the top hat, the tails. They were hard at it when we come round the corner and nearly fell over them. The lady saw our boots, looked up, and simply walked away, her dress dropping down, no problems at all. In front of us is a man who is very drunk, very confused, top hat slightly to one side, and all he could do was kind of try and light a cigar and say, "Good afternoon, Constable, I must apologise." We just sidestepped and carried on. The Licensed Victuallers Garden Party was the highlight of the year. The Licensed Victuallers Homes actually became a very important part of my beat. I had over 100 couples who lived in retirement there, these retired licensees, these pub landlords and landladies, and they were brilliant. But many of them were at the end of their life, as it were, and I was often called to deal with a sudden death, a sad passing away, that kind of thing. There was a lot of sadness there, but the nurses used to lift it. I got a call there, together with another police officer. There'd been somebody trying to steal the birds from their aviary. One of the big things at the entrance was they had this great big aviary full of budgies and canaries, that kind of bird. And somebody had been trying to break in and steal them. And there is a description. And I should have taken note of the description. Big nose, headscarf, big busty woman. It just didn't fit, but I never stopped to consider, because just across the way, there was the would-be thief. Stop, I shout, just like some Keystone Cop silent movie. Off they go, off we go. And I get alongside and I'm about to just push them over because they won't stop, when I saw the face of the would-be thief. It was a big rubber mask. It was one of the nurses. As I've raised my truncheon, I'm about to push her over. She pulls the mask off. "Please don't hit me, please don't hit me." "What are you doing?" "Oh, we just got fed up." Cup of tea, donuts. They always had donuts, which to me as a police officer was brilliant. So I got into the habit. If I was around, I would go for their briefing, their changeover, listen to, was there a problem on the estate? Had there been anybody, strangers wandering around, that kind of thing. And there would always be a cup of tea and a donut. It was great. And the one day I turned up early and there'd been a problem. The nurses were late. And I was just looking around and they said, "Oh yeah, we'll be down in a bit," and blah, 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 blah. Nothing going on the radio. And I suddenly thought, time for a bit of payback. Now, the window in the office was full length. A person could stand in the recess of the window with the curtains drawn. So, with my Victorian police officer's cape, I stood behind the curtains, closed them, and waited. And in come the nurses, and they're chatting away. The kettle has been boiled, and the donuts are out. And the simple question was, who'd like a donut? All I did was whoosh out of the curtains and say, "I'd love one." You've never seen so many nurses run for their lives. It was brilliant. I'd scored one. Well, they would soon have their revenge. Things would escalate. Now, things on the Denham beat became a little bit fraught. The whole area was actually expanding, and more crime was coming out of the Metropolitan Police area. So the Thames Valley Police, in their wisdom, issued me with a motorcycle. Not a big BMW police motorcycle, no, a little Yamaha 125 with a little police sign on it. Now, because it was a motorcycle, because it was a police motorcycle, even though it was a baby motorcycle, I still had all of the gear. I had the police motorcycle helmet, the jacket, and the trousers with the boots, the whole lot. I had to wear it. And the one day, of course, it was one evening, I called in to the licensed vitulers. I can't remember what the problem was, but there had been a problem. And I dealt with it. I walked up into the estate, came back down, and the nurses in the office says, "Hey, Kev, do you want a cup of tea before you go? We've got some donuts." It's that magic word, isn't it? The donuts. So, oh, that'd be great. Thank you very much. I remember it'd been raining outside, so nice. I didn't particularly want to go out on the motorcycle until the rain had stopped. And I used to put my motorcycle helmet on top of a cupboard. And this particular time, I didn't notice. I put the helmet on, did the strap up. "See you, girls. See you, Kevin. Bye, PCX." And away I went. And as I'm riding along on my motorcycle, traffic behind me, the cars behind me, beep, beep, beep. People are putting their thumbs up and, hey, and I'm thinking, weird. But all the way up the 3 miles to Tatlin End, no problems at all. And when I arrived there, there's no other policeman in the station, just me. So I'll bring my motorcycle in, park it up, wipe it down, go upstairs, still in all my motorcycle gear. And I get into my locker room, undo my strap, take off my helmet. And as I'm just about to put it on the shelf, there is a nice sign of a gentleman's appendage with a little message underneath, just big enough for you to read if you're in the car behind my motorcycle. His is this big. That's why the cars have been beeping their horns and giving the thumbs up. The nurses had struck. So it's my turn next. So revenge. Revenge for the sign on the back of me motorcycle helmet. What could I do? Now, I wasn't on my motorcycle. I got my cape and I got my helmet. And I went to have a look for the girls. I couldn't find any of them. Then I realised there'd been an incident within the nursing home. So I found the matron and she said, "Oh yeah, so-and-so has passed away. They're all upstairs." Now, they had a routine. If somebody passed away, they removed the bed, complete with the corpse, away up in the lift, which was big enough, the elevator. And they had a particular room where they would put the deceased until doctors could come and then the funeral directors could deal with it. And I knew that the girls were up there. So I walk up the stairs, say hello to any of the patients that are in there, the inmates, because I knew quite a lot of them, particularly Annie. Yeah, she was a wonderful old lady. And I get to the room and there is a gentleman on the bed there, obviously dead. They've started to lay him out. And I recognised him, I knew who he was, and I thought, what a shame. But I also realised there's an opportunity. So I opened the curtains. Sure enough, it's one of those big windows. I climb up, I close the curtains. Standing behind, remove my police helmet, place it under my arms, and put my cape over my head, looking like some headless monster, some ghost. And there I stood in this darkened room with this poor gentleman who had passed away, waiting for the nurses to come in to see to the said dead body. And in they came. And I am keeping very quiet. When they said, "I think we need an extra pair of hands," my moment had come. I swooshed back the curtains. "Can I be of assistance?" I heard them screaming as they ran the full 3 stories down and out onto the street. Revenge was mine, but that's not the end of the story. Now, the practical jokes by the nurses were not always played just on me. Any officer was fair game. And I remember a shout, a call going, "There's a potential suicide. Somebody's trying to jump off the top of the licensed vitulers nursing home. 4 stories. That'll do it." I go, but a friend of mine, Bryn, he responds. He's in front of me. I see him park up his vehicle. He runs round the corner. There's a nurse pointing and sticking up out of the ground is a pair of legs. Somebody had jumped to their death. Bryn stands there. I look. And then I suddenly thought, how could somebody jump from there and be buried halfway up to their waist in mud? They would just crumple. And in fact, when we approached it, the nurses all burst out laughing. It's a pair of mannequin legs. They got us again. Cup of tea, donuts, giggles all round. But one night I was at the nurses' briefing at the Licensed Victuals Nursing Home when my radio burst into life. It was working at that time. There was an emergency, a road traffic accident nearby I needed to attend. So, put on my helmet, bid farewell to the nurses, and ran out to my motorcycle. I leapt on and then fell off. And I thought to myself, what's going on? I thought, maybe it's the rain. It was soaking wet. So I leapt back on my trusty steed and fell off the other side. The nurses had struck again. The whole bike was covered in KY jelly, lubricant that they use for the patients. But I was on an emergency call, a 999 as they used to be. So the nurses, together with me, quickly wiped the bike clean and away I went. It was time to call a truce. You know those nurses of the LV&H in Denham? They really were terrific. You've got to remember that back up the hill, 3 miles up the hill, my police station at Gerrards Cross, officers were getting less and less. Numbers were being cut until eventually I had very little, if any, support. So if I'd been to a serious incident, something terrible had happened afterwards, I wouldn't go back to the police station. There was nothing there. I would go to the nurses' station where I could wash up, sit down, have a cup of tea with those nurses at the LV&H. So, there you have it. A few laughs from Kerry was on the beat as a village policeman way back in the 80s. Now, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, share and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the channel further, why not have a look at joining our Patreon community? The link is in the description. Now, before I go on any further, quick shout out to 3 of our Patreon members: Robert Brashini, Oliver Boudreau, Ronald Melhorn. Hey guys, thanks a million. Without your support, I wouldn't be able to do these films. So thank you very much, and bye for now.